Okay, let's get started. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our latest lecture in the series about great books and great films. I hope you had a chance to read the book, see the film, do both. I just watched it again over the weekend. It's a great Hitchcock film, in my opinion. A lot of people believe that. And I was just talking to Mark before about some very big differences between the book and the movie, so that'll be interesting to talk about. And you know how it works. At certain points, Mark will prompt you to raise a question or make a comment, and just put that in the Q&A box, and I'll relay it, and we will keep moving. So with that, I'm turning it over to Mark.
Thank you, Michael. And as always, thank you and the funding agency and the library and the people who show up each time. I'm grateful for your participation and support. So you'll remember that this is a genre-based series that, although it's about books, novels, short stories that have been made into major and important motion pictures, our conversation is not really about the film, it's about the book. We did a detective novel with The Maltese Falcon. We did a Gothic novel with Rebecca. We did a Western last time with the Oxbow incident. I want to say that I was disappointed last time that the conversation among the participants was mainly about the genre of Western and wanting to know how this related to other Westerns. And I didn't think there was adequate attention paid to the significant moral issue of what happened with the Posse lynch mob. And the great surprise in that novel is that they're hanged for the murder of a man who's not dead. And I think that might have been mined a little bit more. I hope that tonight, as we turn to a psychological thriller by Patricia Highsmith, her dates were 1921 to 1975. This was the first novel of the 22 novels she's published. She wrote it at 29. It was bought by Hitchcock to be made into a movie the very next year, which means it was made as a movie in the fall of the year that it came out. Hitchcock was a very well-established director in America by the 1950s, incredibly high praise for a young novelist, a first-time novelist. As I said, she published 22 novels in total, five of which were on the character of Tom Ripley, which has another psychological component, double paranoia, anxiety. I think it's worth noting that the great big idea in this book, and I'm sure it's part of what attracted Hitchcock to it, is the crisscross murders. That's a completely original idea. Nearly every contemporary reviewer gave the novel praise, but most importantly, praise for what I'll call that big ticket idea. Original to her, very influential, and the best part of the book, although there are many things to like about the book. In the reviews at the time, people thought that she did a very good job with the depiction of Bruno's incivility, and especially the downward spiral of Guy, who in the movie is a tennis player, which has certain visual advantages. And Anne is a senator's daughter and is played by Ruth Roman, a beautiful movie star in Hollywood who gets second billing in the movie. The movie was also a great hit, but nothing in the novel, nothing about the novel can compete with the big ticket idea of the crisscross trading murders. In the same way, but I do think the surprise or bonus in Oxbow incident is that the man who they're hanged for the murder of did not die. And in the same way that Psycho has the surprise, of course, and if you don't know this, where have you been? I'm going to spoil it for you if you've never seen the movie or read the novel. But the mother is the son. And of course, no one knows that when they go to see the movie. it was one of those movies where they would ask you in the theater, came out in the 1960s, not to divulge the ending. And Hitchcock had his crew go out and buy every copy of Robert Bloch's paperback novel, Psycho, which at that time was also sold in drugstores on those revolving carousels that are now used to sell greeting cards, to buy up the novel so that people would not read the novel before seeing the movie. He wanted them to not have access to the surprise. And as you'll see when we do 2001, as visually inspiring as that movie is and as innovative as it is, there is nothing, in my view, as powerful in that movie as the creation of Hal. What's the matter, Dave? That prescient idea in the 1960s to make a computer that runs amok without running and is very low key and very insinuating and really creepy. And you'll see when we read the book, and if you know the movie or remember it, he's quite a character in both the cinematic and the psychological sense. So reviewers did think that the first half of the novel took too long to get where it's going. And it's certainly true that the novel spends a lot of time on making it credible, and whether you find it credible is a question for us to consider, that Guy thinks he's in an impossible bind, and that at every turn when he thinks about messing up or reaching out for help, he doesn't. And clearly part of what's going on is he has very mixed emotions about his relationship to Bruno. This is not a homosexual novel, but there are homoerotic issues in it of love and hate between these two men who are very different and yet seem very simpatico. It is very striking in the long, detailed first chapter how much Bruno can figure out about Guy, how much he can read about Guy. And like many people who have mental disorders, Bruno is very savvy about reading the psychology of somebody else. Now, in the book, I think you can ding her for not getting through the premise fast enough. But let's be clear, she's writing her first novel, and she's 22 novels ahead of me. I also think Anne is an impossibly vapid character. How many times are we going to believe that when she asks Guy, are you sure there's nothing wrong with Bruno? Are you sure there's nothing wrong with these letters that come from nowhere? Are you sure? And he explains it's fine, doesn't even explain. And that seems to me to be very much less than credible. But the ending in the novel, and again, if you only know the movie, the novel's very different, where it turns out that Guy actually does commit the crisscross murder for reasons we can discuss, and that when he has an opportunity to let Bruno drown, he tries to save him. He's unsuccessful, but he tries, and Bruno dies, which of course he dies in the movie, but in a very different way. Lastly, at the end of the novel, the detective, who's a private detective of the father, not a regular police officer, and has aspects of Columbo in being kind of unassuming but very savvy, he overhears Guy's confession, gets Guy to confess to him, and takes him into custody. It's an open question, and I have my own reading of it, about what he does with Guy once he gets Guy to admit that he did the murder of the father. So I'm going to stop there and say, I do hope that those of you who have comments to make will make some of them about the complexity of the psychological rendering of Bruno, and even more complexly, Guy. So I'll stop now and invite comments from anyone who wants to make them. Michael, how many people do we have in attendance tonight?
About 26, 27.
Okay, thank you. So as we wait, I'll say that one thing a train represents in literature and film is being on a track that you cannot get off of. So that there are many literary works, Hedda Gabler is one of them, where people talk about taking this train to the end, riding it through. And the idea of the track of a train means that unlike a boat or an automobile or an airplane, you can't go right when you want to go right. You can't back up at will. You are in a kind of fatalistic, tracked lane that you can't get out of. And so that's important, I think, to keep that. They wind up being strangers who get on a train of this wacky idea and they ride it through to the end. I think that whether it was intentional or not on Patricia Highsmith's part, it's certainly one aspect of the book from a literary point of view, from an analysis point of view.
So Patricia's asking, do you think Hitchcock's making Guy innocent of the murder weakens the story?
Well, Guy innocent of which murder?
Of Bruno's father. In the movie, Guy doesn't kill anybody.
No, but he knows who killed Miriam, and he knows that there's somebody who's unstable and murderous who is out and about. So I don't think innocence enters into it. In the movie, Hitchcock is always much more interested, and again, I want to come back to the novel mainly, in sensational effect than in realism. So you may remember that when Farley Granger is in the house, he looks at a map which shows him how to get to the father's bedroom. And all it is walk this way forward, down a hallway, turn left, go up a flight of stairs, go down 3 doors. It's the kind of map that a 10-year-old wouldn't have to look at twice. And yet he turns a light on in a house that he's in without being admitted because it just makes a good effect. And it's a good effect that Robert Walker is in his father's bed. I don't think Guy is innocent of anything. I think it was Raymond Chandler, who was the co-writer of the screenplay, who came up with the idea, let's complicate this by having this near murder, not murder. But I think if you were talking morally, a Guy is complicit early and late, and he's played in the movie by a very weak-looking actor, a very young, mushy kind of actor in Farley Granger, and Robert Walker has a lot of dynamism. But in the novel, there's a lot of energy spent on how complicated the love-hate relationship is between these two men. And it's clear that even though Guy hates it every time that Bruno steps up, he is reluctantly and sometimes not reluctantly inviting to have meals with him, to take calls from him, to be stupid. And maybe, I don't think it's about sex. I want to say this is not a novel with sex, although Anne winds up getting pregnant and Miriam winds up getting pregnant. There's not a lot of sexual energy going on between Anne and Guy before their marriage, during their marriage, at their wedding or afterwards, even though they do conceive a child together. But there's a lot of sexuality. There's a lot about Bruno's hatred of women, the fact that whenever he has had heterosexual sex, he always finds himself outside the experience, looking at it as an outsider. And of course, he's very much as this demented playboy with a lot of money potentially once his father dies and he can get access to it, who is a voyeur of life. And he is enjoying, by a kind of proxy relationship, by a kind of symbiosis, feeding off of Guy's life, and his relationship with Anne. One of the things that the books make clear, which is not in the movie at all, is that Guy is concerned that Bruno has designs on Anne and that Anne may be returning the attraction. He says at one point, he's absolutely sure that Bruno could steal Anne away from him if he wanted. And there is a charismatic connection between those two characters. That's not in the movie. The movie is not concerned about that.
So Susan's comment is that Bruno is lonely and Guy is plagued by guilt and insecurity of his own emotions.
I think that's right. We should also realize that the man-child of Bruno is somebody with a lot of talent. I do think he has great psychological insight, a lot of spirit, but nothing to do, no purpose in life, that he has talent, but no career, no mission. By contrast, the architect of Guy Haynes is clearly a very talented man and has a kind of genius. And that weighs on him because he's afraid of failure and he knows that that career is at risk if either one, he is not focused enough to do good drawings and to keep the contract that he wins, or two, that his career could be ended by insinuations from Bruno. And it happens. One of his clients is asked if you knew that there's some suspicion that Guy might be involved in his wife's murder, would that change your opinion? And he cancels the contract. So they're two very different men. You could say that Bruno has too little to do and that Guy has too much to do.
One of the Bruno's one-liners, and when they're in the train, when they first meet each other, I think he says something like, "I admire people who do things."
Right. Exactly. Well, there again, you have an underachiever and an overachiever. It's also telling in the book that even though he's given a weapon by Bruno to kill the father, he takes the revolver that he himself bought, and this clear phallic imagery that when he's approaching the house and he's nervous about, in the dark, about his being successful, he feels through the pocket of his suit the hard metal of the revolver. It's hard not to see that as a phallic image and maybe a masturbatory image. It's also interesting that if he's going to do this murder, and he does it not with Bruno's gun, but with his gun, as if he's taking more ownership of the murder than you might think otherwise. It's hard not to see that these two men, as different as they are not kind of doppelgangers. Guy has this theory, which is mentioned early and late. And in fact, when Bruno comes near the end of the novel and stays overnight, not sexually, but because he needs a place to sleep, and Anne is soft-hearted for him, they repeat again that Guy has this theory that everything has its opposite. And when Anne doesn't completely understand it, Bruno says, no, it's not simply that there's black and white. It's not simply something that everything generates its opposite. It's much more dynamic than that. That's Guy's theory well before he meets Bruno. Bruno is a monomaniac. He has one idea only, and it's about murder and power and money and freedom to be the playboy he wants to be. Guy's complexity is he is a dual maniac. He's always thinking doubly. And that's part of his, I'm sure, talent as an architect, and it's part of his doom as someone who gets caught up in this web. Did anybody in the group feel like during the reading of the novel you wanted to step up and kick Guy on the ass and say, come on, I know it's wacky, but you know what you know? Get the people who love you, go to the police and explain what happened. Anybody, not even a police detective, anybody talking to Bruno for more than half an hour is going to find it credible that he's nuts. Now, of course, that would ruin the novel and ruin the movie. But from the point of view of the person in the audience or reading the book at home, you want to say, how did you let it get this far? If you couldn't trust Anne, who is a stronger character in the movie than she is in the novel, don't you have people in your professional associations, your friends, in your firm that you can reach out to say, I'm in a terrible bind. Let me explain to you how it happened.
Well, like I said earlier, Mark, to you, one of the, not so much this weekend when I watched it again, but in an earlier viewing of the movie, I started to perceive Guy as being so pathetic that during most of the movie, I started rooting for Bruno.
Yeah, well, the one of the several famous scenes in the movie, and again, Hitchcock is always more interested in suspense and effect than he is in realism. When Robert Walker, who died right after the movie was completed in his 30s, when he's reaching down through that sewer grate and is inches away from picking up his lighter, which of course is an important artifact in the movie, and can barely get the tips of his fingers, it falls further down. And remarkably, he's somehow able to stretch his arm another 4 inches to not only reach it, but to pick it up with his palm. Completely unrealistic. But that close-up scene, which of course was shot with an oversized sewer, is very memorable in the movie. And it's one of the things that the movie does about surface things that the novel is interested in the depth of psychology. There is an amusement park in both of them. Only the movie has the impossibly out of control carousel that goes faster than any carousel could ever go in any amusement park. They both have the murder on this island of the rowboats. Raymond Chandler, as I said, was a co-writer of the movie script. Again, I'm inviting readers who are here and who have read the book, and I hope a critical mass of you have read the book, who want to say something about how you found it as a reading experience. Did you enjoy reading the very claustrophobic description of the second half of the novel and Guy's downward descent? Or something else, or not enjoy it? While I wait, I will tell you that Graham Greene, himself a great writer of psychological thrillers, said that Patricia Highsmith was a poet of apprehension, a poet of apprehension. I think that's a good quote.
Nothing so far, Mark, unless somebody's typing away.
Okay, let me say, if the issue is that a critical mass of you have not read the book, which of course is fine, no one's required to read the book, it would be helpful if I knew that, because I won't be trying to get blood from a stone. Could you somehow signal to Michael, if you're willing, that you have no comment because you're here but haven't read the book? I can welcome that. I can talk to people who haven't read a book, and I'd be happy then to stop asking questions of you if you haven't read it. You might have read it and have nothing to say. That's also permitted, of course. Well, I say something else as we wait. So, as those of you who've done courses with me before know, the essence of a comedy, whether Shakespeare comedy or a Billy Wilder comedy, is that it looks at human beings as social creatures in their relationship to other people. It says that a big aspect of human life is our relationship to our employers, our friends, other people, neighbors, and therefore the relationships that are made and examined in comedies are social relationships, and comedies end with a social fact, a marriage, which is not a biological or natural fact, but a social contract. By contrast, tragedies, whether Shakespeare or others, says that the essence of human beings is not their social nature, but their biological moral nature. And the central fact of human life in tragedy is that we die. And it tries to make sense at the end of the tragedy of getting some meaning out of that stark fact. But because it's interested in people as biological creatures, mortal creatures, the relationship between the characters in the tragedy is not boyfriend, girlfriend, friend, husband, wife. It's fathers and children, mothers and children, brothers and sisters. It looks at people as biological beings, which is why Shakespeare's comedies, Jane Austen's comedies, are about courtship and marriage, and works like King Lear or Hamlet are about Hamlet Sr. and Hamlet Jr., King Lear and his daughters, Gloucester and his sons. It looks at the relationships that are natural bonds between people, not social, but biological. That's a long-winded way of saying that this has the comic plot, I don't mean ha-ha, in that Guy's problem issue is with a fiance, girlfriend, fiance, wife, a social contract, and that what bedevils Bruno is his relationship to his father. He also has a wacky relationship with his mother that I think psychiatrists could have several monographs on. But his issue is the natural biological bond of one generation to another. Now, I'm not suggesting that Patricia Highsmith knew that or cared about that, and I don't think you have to know that when you read the book. But it is interesting to think that they're not only from two different worlds in the sense of one of them fabulously wealthy potentially and unhinged, and the other one is a hardworking, not yet successful, not yet mega successful, young man on the rise. That in addition to those differences, Bruno's operating in the world of tragedy. He hates his father. He wants to kill his father. He's successful in getting his father killed. And that Guy operates in a completely different world of social relationships. To me, as an English teacher, that's an interesting point to observe.
So, Mark, we got 4 people haven't read the book, someone who's a third of the way, someone who couldn't finish the book because she found it depressing and hated Bruno because he was so manipulative, and also hated Guy because he would not stand up for himself. And then one other person who read the whole book and says that Gerard is her favorite character.
Okay, so I appreciate all those comments. Let me say that I'm a great believer in this. I have never read a book in hopes that I like the characters in it. There are a number of books I've read where I actually love the characters. I love Mrs. Dalloway, which I talked about this last weekend. I love Tess and Tess of the D'Urbervilles. There are characters in novels. I love Emma in Jane Austen's novel. But I read novels for the great reading experience, and I hope that I will find people to like in my actual real life. I wish readers, both my students when I had students and those of you who come to these events, would comment on the writing as writing. I think it is true that the book is very dark. I don't think it's depressing. I have to say that I am not easily depressed by things like works of fiction, but it is very claustrophobic. It makes you want to get out of the book because there's so much thinking and rethinking. But the writing, the description of dawn in several places, of Guy's anxiety and paranoia is beautifully rendered. And because of my eyesight, I listened to the book on Audible, an Audible version, and it's hypnotic how good a writer she is. The smallest details about, for example, Guy needing to leave the Bruno's house after killing the father, and being scratched by the bushes and how he winds up getting to where he gets. Or even better, when he wants to find Miriam and sees a car parked outside and hears the voices of the two men and two women. In the movie, it's two guys and one woman to make Miriam more of a promiscuous girl. It's two pairs of lovers or daters. And he gets a cab finally and has it make a U-turn so he can come up behind the Chevy he has to follow, and it's not there. And then it turns out he sees it, the red light of its brakes farther down, and there's a description of his following that car and then following Miriam. That's very well rendered, very well written. And for me, what makes a novel worth reading is the quality of the prose. And I think this gets high marks, even more than the characters. And I have never, we all have our own taste. I have never given up on a novel because I don't want to keep company with one of its characters.
Well, we've got a few more comments now from people who read the book. In contrasting the book to the movie, one of the key differences is that as Guy devolves in the book to the point of committing the murder, and afterward he becomes more closely the double of Bruno, whereas in the movie there's the continued stark reminder of Guy to Bruno, quote, you are a lunatic and you need help. But Guy is never lured into Bruno's web.
Right. I think that's an excellent and accurate observation. I will say there are many instances in the book where either explicitly or by nuance, we see that these two men, it's almost as if they're sharing a single personality. There are references to that. They have dreams about each other. They talk about the being Bruno / Guy. I will say that part of the reason why the movie does not have the Guy Haynes character kill the father is I think that the if not the actual production code of censors, I think Hollywood would not have tolerated such a senseless murder. That is, doing it just because you feel that you backed into a compact about crisscross murders. And I think the Hollywood would not have the stomach for letting that happen. There is no censorship or production code for novels. And even so, it's striking the guy gets to the point where he feels he can't back out. And it's telling that he uses his own gun and not the gun he was given by Bruno, as if he is taking some responsibility for the murder. One reading could be that he actually is attracted to the evil idea of doing this thing. Everybody has good and evil. We're told in one chapter he stopped believing in God as a teenager, but he does believe in guilt. He does believe that he should suffer. That's an old Mel Brooks joke. I don't believe in the Bible, but I do believe in sin. The idea that I don't believe that God is good, but I do believe in the bad things in the Bible. I do accept a religion of fear and guilt. I just don't think there's salvation. Guy explicitly thinks that in one of the chapters where we're told about his moral psychology.
Patricia says, I read the first half carefully and with interest, but began skimming the second half because it seemed repetitious and because Guy's struggle with guilt wasn't as interesting to me as the focus on the murder of Miriam.
Yeah.
I think Hitchcock's alteration of the plot and shortening up the story after the murder of Miriam was a good idea.
Yeah. So let me say that no one asked me to edit the works of great writers, but if I were to give a suggestion to the now departed Patricia Highsmith, I would say that somewhere a few chapters into the downward spiral of Guy, I would tap her on the shoulder and say, Pat, we get it. Let's move on. Like, we get it. I think that part about his back and forth, getting letters, lying or equivocating with his absurdly inattentive fiance is overdone. And I think that that part of the novel could be shorter. It's also true, agreeing with the person who just made this contribution, that the Miriam murder, first of all, it's the first murder. We're shocked that it's moved so quickly. It's just weeks after they've met to do a murder that Guy didn't agree to. It is a young woman who may or may not have been pregnant at the time and who is killed for no good reason by a man who was a stranger on a train. And it has a lot of compelling, dramatic, cinematic action aspects to it. Whereas the slow buildup to the murder of Mr. Bruno Sr., who doesn't have much presence in the book, is much more shadowy. It's much less clear, and it's hard to have the same level of interest in that. If you're not taken up with the excruciating detail of Guy Haynes making a hell for himself, it's hard to be patient with the second, say, 2/3 of the book. You know, in the movie, which is moved to Washington, D.C. as a locale, you see Bruno standing in front of, I think it's the Lincoln Memorial, and it's a very stark thing that you see this guy standing alone in front of this massive white monument, and you know that he's a psychotic. Or you see him at a tennis match where everyone else in the bleacher seats is looking left and right to follow the movement of the ball, and his head is looking straight ahead at Guy. There are cinematic effects that a movie has access to that the novel doesn't. But I do think the big ticket idea that we're going to crisscross murders, and of course the cross tennis rackets allow for a pun, doubles in tennis and their doubling of the characters. The movie has a lot of advantages if you're going to make a movie about the surface level of the interaction between these two men. The novel is not interested in the surface level. It's interested in the complexity of whether they are two halves of a single self, of whether they are opposites who feed off each other by a kind of complementary nature, or if there's a homoerotic undercurrent. And I say homoerotic, which is what critics use to say not necessarily sexual desire looking towards sexual intercourse, but to have erotic feelings that are from someone aroused by someone of the same sex, which maybe lead eventually to coitus, but doesn't have to.
So Kate says, I read the book and I found it a compelling but disturbing read because I started to feel as a reader that I was complicit in the knowledge of the murders. Your remark about claustrophobia landed with me.
Yeah. That's Patricia?
That's Kate.
Kate. So, Kate, well observed. Let me say that I do think that one of the things that happens in a lot of compelling murder stories, so, right, a detective story is about a detective solving a crime like the Maltese Falcon. But a crime novel or murder novel is about a crime or murder being done, and it doesn't necessarily have to have a detective. Now, there's a detective in this novel who comes in sort of towards the end, and depending on how you feel about people being brought to justice, that may vindicate the novel for you. But most of the novel is about crime mentality. And I do think one of the things that happens is that a book brings us into a kind of partnership with the person planning the crime. And I'll give you this example. When Billy Wilder was filming Double Indemnity with Fred MacMurray and Barbara Stanwyck, a great film noir, he has them be partners in the killing of the husband, who is then thrown off a train to make it look like he died from the fall. And the double indemnity of the title is because Fred MacMurray is an insurance salesman who tells Barbara Stanwyck if we have a policy that your husband is indemnified against an accident on a train because he travels for work all the time, and if he were to die from a train injury, you would get a boatload of money. And together, they become lovers and conspire to kill him just that way. And they get off the train, or he gets off the train, and he meets Barbara Stanwyck, the wife of the man he just killed and his current lover, to drive away from the railroad tracks, and the car won't start. The car won't start. Now, here's a remarkable thing. These are two truly wicked people. A woman who has conspired with her new lover to kill her husband for money. And you find out later on in the film, she doesn't have any loyalty to that man either. And a man who has used his knowledge of the insurance profession to not only abet in a killing, but to embezzle money from his firm. Two very bad characters. But when you're in the movie theater or you're sitting at home watching that movie and their car won't start, you want their car to start. They're evil people. They're murderers. You shouldn't want them to get away, but you do, because we've been with them and not the husband, and you want the car to start because that's the nature of the cinematic or literary experience. Now, I know from my research on the movie, Billy Wilder had that idea because the morning he came to the studio to shoot that scene, his car wouldn't start. And when his car finally started, he thought, I should put this in the movie. Genius. I do think, Kate, we are complicit because of how intimate the novel is about all the thoughts about guilt and paranoia and crime and punishment and so on.
So Lois says, I have read the book. The first sentence captured my experience of the book. Quote, the train tore along with an angry, irregular rhythm.
Uh-huh.
I'm glad I finally read a Patricia Highsmith novel, but it will be a while before I want to read something so relentlessly oppressive again.
Well, I can only say that The Old Man and the Sea, which is coming, has more of a moral uplift. And 2001, A Space Odyssey, suggests that the future of mankind is glorious. So you've got that. We also have the Thanksgiving holiday coming up, and I'm sure you can all find your own things to be thankful for. Let me suggest to all of you that whether you've read the book or not, if you have the book and haven't read it, or you have read it, if you were to take any couple of pages from the first chapter and read it out loud, maybe the first 4 pages of the novel, read it out loud or have someone read it to you out loud, I think you'll hear how well written it is, how well written this first-time novel writer is at describing things beyond just the bare bones. In the movie version, the railway station that they're at is a Connecticut railway station. I think it's Fairfield. It was filmed, those scenes of Metcalf when they get off the train or when a guy calls from a phone booth. That's a Connecticut railway station for those of you who are pulling for the nutmeg state.
Huh. Did not know that. So Janet is making a comment about the symbolism of the train, a little bit different from what you were saying in the sense of being on a train as a journey to find yourself by realizing that you're journeying in a circle and coming back to yourself. Just a different view on the train symbol.
About that's your interpretation. I don't associate trains with circles. I think a train goes somewhere and it only comes back if it comes back. And if it comes back, I don't see going down to New York City, Grand Central Station, and coming back as a circular trip because there's no circle involved. It's one line down and one line back. But I allow that we can interpret things as we like. But there is a long history of trains being a symbol in both literature and film of not being able to get off because your journey is tracked, and you can't just say, oh, you know what, Well, I'll give you a perfect example. I have friends who don't like to travel on vacation by train because it doesn't allow them to say, you know what, this town coming up looks interesting. I hear it has a nice coffee shop or a great bookstore. Let's go off the highway and take a little by road. You can do that when you're driving. You can't do that when you're training. And I do think that that idea of you're tracked into a path you can't get out of is very much is often invoked in movies and books. I will also say, because I'm a word person, I think Strangers on a Train is a great title, just a great title. Strangers on a Train, and for those of you who are attuned to poetry, the long A sound in stranger and the long A sound in trains gives it a kind of poetic epithet like effect, strangers on a train. And of course, they are strangers when they meet. They are two strange men, as we come to learn. And the fact that they're on this train puts everything into motion. In the movie, for those of you who haven't seen or recently seen the movie, the great opening sequence is you see the men only from their shoes for the first several minutes of their getting on the train. And you know only that one of them is wearing expensive shoes and one of them is wearing more sportier shoes. And it goes to see their bodies when sitting in the same car across from each other, their shoes brush up against one another. And that brushing up of the shoes is also in the novel. But it pulls back to let us see the whole people after they accidentally touch shoes. Now, on one level, it's Hitchcock being innovative as a director to say, here's something I can do that's kind of neat, introduce you to these characters by their footwear. On another level, it shows you that they're from two different worlds just by the virtue of their clothes. There's a lot about clothes in this novel. That lunch where Bruno invites Guy out and then gives him a gift of multiple expensive ties, linen and silk and interesting designs, is an example of that. Another thing that it does is it suggests that it's a kind of meeting cute, that touching of the toes. But they're strangers, and then we find out that even once they get to know each other better, they are both strange men. They are strangers in being unusual characters.
There's also a scene right near the end, maybe almost at the very end, where the camera's shooting it from the floor level in the train, and two other people kick their shoes at each other.
Yes. Uh-oh, watch out.
Like, uh-oh, it's about to happen again.
If we're nearing the top of the hour, I'd like to use a few minutes just to preview Old Man and the Sea. Is that all right, Michael?
Yes.
So this was a late masterpiece by Ernest Hemingway. It was his most popular novel because by the time he wrote it, people knew Hemingway as much from his legend, from his machismo, from his looks, Papa Hemingway, big game hunting, fishing, bullfighting, and that he was a celebrity the way that Mark Twain eventually became more well known as a photograph than even people who knew his novels. He was a brand, and he wrote this late in his life, relatively speaking. Now, he's not an old man, but within 10 years, he's going to kill himself with a shotgun, and so he doesn't live a whole lot longer. This story about a Cuban man on an expedition that winds up being a Herculean contest with a great fish. And the novel, I think, was justly praised. Again, his best-selling novel. I don't think it's his best novel by any stretch of the imagination. His novels, The Sun Also Rises, or Farewell to Arms, or In Our Time, a collection of short stories, I think are better works. But it's a great yarn And I will tell you that if you're inclined to see the movie, and of course you have the option to see the movie instead of reading the book, even though that's not what I want you to do, and that's not how this series was designed. Like Oxbow Incident, it has very cheap production values. They had to pay enough to get Spencer Tracy, a major star, to be essentially a one-man show. There's almost nobody in the movie except Spencer Tracy. And as a result, the effects of him being on the water is clearly in a studio tank rather than at sea. I don't think it hurts the movie because so much of the drama is about this man, this fish, and the natural world, which has a power beyond what you might call special effects. But it is true that it does not have the feel of a major motion picture. And my understanding is that they blew the budget on Spencer Tracy, who is wonderful in it, Santiago, and there is imagery and symbolism there. And if you do not know the novel, many people who know the story know it through the novel and not the movie. When Michael and I first discussed this series, he was surprised to learn that there was a movie of Old Man and the Sea, and he's not the only one, because it's not a movie that has a lot of fans today. But I will say that the book has lots of symbolism that I'll leave you to discover about the nature of this quest to get this fish and what to do with it. And Santiago, the name of the Cuban played by Spencer Tracy, is a man who says a lot in a monologue while he's fishing. So I hope you enjoyed that book. Hemingway is always a great read, a remarkably economical writer. People mistakenly say that he writes in short sentences. That's not true. He can write in long sentences, but his long sentences are connected by connectors like and or but. He does not write this happened and simultaneously this happened. He's not interested in linking things together in any way but one thing after another, because he believes in the simplicity of language, because his experience with the First World War is that language sends young boys to war. And if I can add a personal PS, I think my friend Meg is in the audience tonight, and I will say that the website you're looking for no longer exists, Meg, because I tried to have a website enterprise right after I retired, and it didn't get sufficient attention to keep it extant. And so it has gone the way of all flesh. But I still do about 80 events a year in various libraries in person or mainly by Zoom, with thanks to Michael, who's one of my stalwarts. So next time, Old Man and the Sea, and we're looking forward to 2001. I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. There are many things in life to be thankful for, as you know. Things are never so bad that you can't find things to be thankful for. This book may not be one of those things, but the Wilton Library and Michael Bellicosa are certainly among the things we can be thankful for.
Oh, well, thanks very much, Mark. Well, thanks everybody for coming and for this very interesting discussion. I just want to throw one last comment in, just a suggestion. Kate has said another great movie based on a Patricia Highsmith novel is called The American Friend, directed by Wim Wenders, with Dennis Hopper and Bruno Ganz, based on one of the Ridley novels, and it is absolutely haunting.
And whose recommendation is that?
Kate.
Kate. Thank you, Kate. Let me say that if you've never read The Talented Mr. Ripley, any of them, read the first one first. It was recently, a couple of years ago, made into a TV series that was very good. But those are remarkably good novels and very much in the mold of Patricia Highsmith, and not as claustrophobic and as what's the word? Someone used depressing, not as stultifying as this book. I think those are good reads and a remarkably wicked imagination. Poet of apprehension. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good Thanksgiving. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye now.